Okay, hello and good afternoon, everyone. We're about to get started with our panel discussion, Where to Next? How 4 startups tap the regional resources to scale, grow, or exit. I'm Kate Leonard. I'm the Digital Marketing Manager at NextCorps. This is our 4th Startup Week event. There's more coming up throughout the rest of this week, and you can catch all the recordings of the prior sessions if you missed those. We'll get the recordings up over the next few days. It's all available on our website, the link you see on your screen, which I will add to the chat in just a moment. A very brief introduction to NextCorps. If you are not familiar with us, we're a nonprofit on a mission to help entrepreneurs launch and grow. We are located in downtown Rochester, where we run a startup incubator and several accelerator programs for entrepreneurs, as well as our consulting services for manufacturers. Some very quick housekeeping notes. I think we're all very familiar with Zoom at this point. This session is being recorded. You'll receive a link to the recording in your inbox later today. We'll leave about 10 minutes at the end of the panel to answer your questions. All of this is going to be moderated, so lots of questions for our panelists, but we'll leave time for your questions toward the end. Just click the Q&A button on your control panel to submit a question at any point. Now, I'm very happy to introduce our moderator, Jim Senall. He's the president of NextCorps, and he'll be talking today with our 4 panelists. We have Dan O'Connell, General Manager of Plug Power's Rochester Innovation Center. We have Sashti Balasundaram, CEO of Radiate, Ian Gauger, COO of Circle Optics, and Rachel Rosen, CEO and co-founder of Wex Energy. So take it away, Jim. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kate. And thanks to all of our panelists for joining us today. They've all got great stories, and we can't wait to hear more about them. And thank you all for tuning in who are watching today's session. So as Kate mentioned, we've got Danny and Sashti and Rachel, who all have different companies in different spaces. And let me start today's panel by giving each of them 5 minutes to talk about what their company is, what they do, and what kind of resources that they've utilized along their journey. Every startup has a different journey and different path. There's a lot of things out there that could be helpful to startup companies, and we're going to dive into what some of those are, how to find them, what things maybe to look out for throughout today's panel. So let's kick it off, and maybe I will ask Sashti to start us off.
Put me on the spot. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for inviting me to this. Quick spiel about us. As we Radiate, we are essentially, our mission is to improve soil health. And like there's smart homes, there's smart cars, we're developing smart compost systems. One of the reasons being is the UN estimates that we have 60 years left to grow food on arable land. We get our nutrients from soil, but soil health is degrading. So what we're trying to do is essentially create soils faster and healthier through our technology, which is hardware, software, and data. That's sort of the quick spiel about us. We are probably the youngest on this panel. We incorporated in 2019, so just 3 years old. And my background is in public health. I'm not an engineer, but have been working in the waste management sort of recycling sector for about 15 years. So when I left government, that was my most recent job. I became an entrepreneur in 2019. And then actually, I'm based in Buffalo. So I connected with resources regionally, and one of them being Launch New York. That was sort of the impetus of my entrepreneurial career. So Launch New York, and then Launch New York also connects with NYSERDA. NYSERDA is sort of New York State's energy development arm. There's a program called ECO, so Emerging Clean Tech Opportunities. So we were an organization within ECO of Launch New York. And through that mentorship I found details about the hardware scale-up program, which is now called Scale for Climate Tech. So that program specifically helps emerging startups with manufacturing readiness levels. So there's a mentorship. So that really supported us 2 years ago, and it still continues to support us till today. From there, we also were into the RG&E program. So I had no clue about I didn't know much about NextCorps. I didn't know much about Rev Ithaca, but these were 2 strong partnerships that were developed in the upstate region to support startups. So Scale for Climate Tech supported me with RG&E grant, and we had essentially weekly or monthly mentorship calls with the team at NextCorps, which was amazing. Shout out to Matt and Max to support us through this development, and we still continue to connect with them. And then RG&E really supported us with RG&E, and also the Scale for Climate Tech supported us with regional strategic partners. So we're able to actually manufacture locally with organizations in Rochester, in Ithaca. ArcWorks is one of them that we continue to do low volume assembly runs of our units. And then lastly, I won't spiel too much, but recently we were a winner of Grow New York. So Grow New York really supports food and agriculture startups in the region. So we're based in Western New York. We essentially, our local supply chain is in Central New York. So Grow New York is helping us throughout this year with mentorship and funding. So I'll stop there, but that's sort of our career over the last 3 years.
Great. Thank you, Sasha. Those are some great programs and resources that you have taken advantage of. Let's flip over to Ian and tell us about Circle Optics.
Yeah, definitely. Circle Optics, we develop wide field of view imaging systems for aerospace and defense. We're also working on a system for the media and entertainment market as well. So you can think of these as 360-degree cameras. Ours obviously operate a bit differently than anyone else's, which makes us novel. That's what makes our company stand apart. Our journey, I think, was similar to a lot of companies. It all started with a question, an idea, and that question for us was, what if we could fix the issue of parallax in 360 cameras, which is an issue with all 360 cameras today, and what could we do if we had a better camera? So like a lot of startups, you start with family and friends, you try to get them to buy in and back you a little bit. After that, we moved on to accelerators. The Illuminate Accelerator was kind of a huge turning point for us. As one of the winners of the accelerator, we received $250,000 in funding on top of the initial $100,000 when we joined the accelerator. But beyond just the funding from the accelerator, it gave us a lot of credibility to go out to and talk to angel investors. It taught us so much. It made a ton of great connections and introductions. We also really leveraged our networks. Myself, I'm a graduate of both the University of Rochester and RIT. Most of the people on our team actually are from one of those universities. So we have close relationships with both. Really great way to find a lot of talent, mentorship. Beyond that, we recently completed Genius New York. We were one of the 5 teams selected for that program as well. So that's an accelerator in the Syracuse area based on unmanned systems, which is where a lot of our technology is going these days. And beyond that, we're primarily funded currently through SBIR, STTR grant revenue. So we've been working closely with the Air Force as well as National Science Foundation. We've done a project for NASA to continue to mature our technology and start to create products for different markets. Actually, some success news here. Just in Q1 of this year, we've been awarded $2.5 million in SBIR and STTR contracts. So really great start to the year. I don't imagine we're going to keep that going over the next 3 quarters, but it's enough to keep our team of approximately 12 right now busy, and we're actually actively hiring and continuing to grow in upstate New York.
That's great, and congratulations on those recent awards. Fantastic news. We'll go next to Rachel Rosen, who's founder of Wex Energy. Rachel.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks for inviting me to join this panel. It's really an honor to be with my 3 co-panelists. So Wex Energy started in a very old-fashioned way. Ron, who's the founder, had a very real problem. He started searching for a solution, and in his research, it became very clear that many people had the same problem he had. He was freezing cold in his home office in the winter, and he was boiling hot in the summer. And his home office had 7 windows in it. And so you could just imagine, it was almost, it felt like being in a greenhouse, even though it wasn't a greenhouse type of setup. So he started to research for a solution, and that's what birthed Window Skin, which is a snap-on window insulation panel that keeps heat inside in the winter and outside in the summer. That's exactly where we want to keep it. And from there, we did the very hard work that everybody else has been doing to build a sustainable company, which began with prototyping, different versions, finally came around to a version we thought was good enough and acceptable, would be aesthetically acceptable to start entering the market. We did a lot of market research, third-party validation, and finally, we brought the product to market in 2019. We were starting to really kick off as COVID hit. And because we have to go into occupied spaces, you can imagine what happened to us in COVID. We had to stop selling. We just couldn't get into spaces. I was on the phone yesterday with a regional window window distributor who reached out to us for our product in an elder care facility they're working on. And he said they have been talking for a long time. They were only able to get into the facility for the first time in February 22. So this is very common, that if you need to be inside where other people are, it's very hard to get in. So we, before COVID hit, obviously we were already utilizing upstate resources and New York State resources. New York State is a very, very unusual environment in that we have NYSERDA, we have a lot of incubators here, a lot of accelerators. It's just a very nurturing environment for startups and entrepreneurs. And when you talk to someone that's from a different state, you really begin to appreciate the expanse of what's available here. So we are a NYSERDA company. We're a member of 2 different NYSERDA incubators, this Clean Tech Center in Syracuse and ACRE, which is the NYU incubator in Brooklyn. We're also a startup member at the Center of Excellence at Syracuse, which is focused on the built environment. And again, that's one of the advantages of being in New York State. There's so many different options out there. We chose to be at the COE in Syracuse because they're focused on our problem. If the built environment COE was in Binghamton or New York City, we would have gone there. But you can really find the expertise and the mentorship that you need looking around the state. And of course, our home base is here at NextCorps. We are based in Rochester, and we looked around at a couple of different incubators and locations and felt that this was really a great fit. And it's a great fit in terms of guidance and mentorship that's available here. And there's also access to funding. We have really focused a lot on non-dilutive funding. So as a NYSERDA member, Sashti mentioned the Scale for Climate. What's Energy was actually in the first cohort when it was still hardware scale up. And we were the only company in that cohort to meet the goal, which was MRL of 8. And we were really proud of that, but it really helped move the dial for us. And funding through hardware scale up at the time, now Scale for Climate, has really helped us move our manufacturing forward in very significant ways. NYSERDA EIRs, some of whom are located here, some who are all over the state. As a result of COVID, we've all become very comfortable with Zoom, and all the other virtual meeting methods. So that makes access really terrific. So we've worked hard to be where we are. There's a lot of behind the scenes work, and New York State is just a very nurturing state to be in for an entrepreneur that's looking to grow and to find resources.
Great. Thanks so much, Rachel. And last but certainly not least, we're going to turn it over to Dan O'Connell, who is the general manager of the Rochester Innovation Center and the Gigafactory for Plug Power, but was the founder of American Fuel Cell, which got acquired by Plug Power. So Dan, tell us about AFC maybe, and then your journey.
Sure, Jim, thanks for inviting me. And those are 3 great stories about entrepreneurs in Rochester, which is pretty amazing to hear. So my story is a little bit different, but about 10 years ago, GM closed their fuel cell facility here. And then I started doing some consulting, and everybody kept asking me what I was going to do with all those great fuel cell resources in Rochester. And so I sort of met with my partner, and we decided we wanted to start a company, although we had no experience, both having come from large companies in the past. So we fished around a little bit and came up with the NextCorps Nexus program. I think we were in the first cohort. For some reason, Jim really believed in the technology, and so he allowed us to enter that, and we were able to work through that. And it was really amazing to learn everything we didn't know about being an entrepreneur through the program. So it was very, very helpful. Really helped us refine our business plan, which was really important. So then we started making some prototypes in a lab over at Kodak that we kind of rented on the cheap, put together some prototypes, and started trying to develop the technology utilizing Kodak's roll-to-roll coating capability that was sitting idle. So we spent a lot of time perfecting that. So our whole goal was to try to bring fuel cell technology back to Rochester, as well as bring some high-tech, high-paying jobs to our area. So we sort of made some prototype parts that we thought were pretty good. We took them over to RIT at the Golisano Institute, and they kind of put a third-party validation on that performance. And we took that results and went to NYSERDA and got a NYSERDA grant to scale up prototypes. And then we got an SBIR grant to take the next step after that. And so as part of the Nexus program, we really started talking about how to give a pitch about the company. And so I learned how to do that, which was very helpful. Went out and talked to Excel partners, and they were able to fund us with some seed round funding, as well as NextCorp and some family and friends. So that sort of got us off the ground. And Jim set me up with a speaking engagement at some investors in New York City. And while I was there, the personnel from Plug Power came up to me afterwards and asked if I could deliver on what my pitch said I could. And they said, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And so we had a discussion with Plug Power. And so after about a couple of hundred parts, them sampling them and running them, they really wanted us to scale up quickly. At that point, after about 4 years, I'd pretty much tapped out my personal funds. And so they asked me how fast I could scale up. And I said it would be a while. And so the CEO of Plug Power said, all right, then I want to buy your company. And so in a very short period of time, we were acquired. And then we started to scale up very rapidly with Plug Power's help. We then became the third largest manufacturer of membrane electrode assemblies in the world in a couple of short years. And then they asked me to expand it even further. And so I talked to GRE and Bob Duffy at the Rochester Chamber, and they elected to bring the Gigafactory here to Rochester, which is a giant scale, very large building. And we've now ramped up to 150 people, and I've got a bunch of openings, and I'm scaling up even further. Should have 400 employees by the end of the year. So things are going great for us, and we're having a ball. So that's my story.
That's fantastic, Dan. Thanks so much for sharing that. And all of our founders hope to be in that position someday as well, talking about the acquisition and the scaling up to 400 employees. That's just amazing. So let me invite people to and remind people that they can put questions in the Q&A that we'll get to toward the end of the session. We heard a lot of different resources just mentioned by all of you, and it included things like incubators and accelerator programs. There are the large scale ones like Illuminate was mentioned, Grow New York, Genius New York, there's 43 North, there's 76 West, major things that didn't exist 5+ years ago. Centers of excellence with technology, places like Eastman Business Park with assets and resources, and grant programs, and on down the list. It's quite an exhaustive list. Again, 10 years ago, most of that didn't exist at all. So the question now is, how did you guys find out about these things? It can be a little daunting for entrepreneurs today to try to navigate. And the thing we always hate to hear is, gosh, I wish I would have known about that 3 years ago. It would have saved me, 12 months of time and effort. So how do you find out about where all these things are? And Rachel, maybe I can start with you.
Unmute. You have to ask questions. And part of the, what you have to remember is as you're starting out, you're in a different phase than you're going to be every 6 or 12 months, hopefully, if not faster. And you may hear about something at month 3 or month 12 that really isn't going to kick in for you until you're at 24 months or later on. And so you have to be open enough to listen and to recognize what is applicable at the stage that you're in, and then to find the people that can help you. So one of the programs that we have found exceptionally helpful is it's actually based out of here at NextCorps, and it's got a phenomenal team of people, is the manufacturing exchange program. So if you're a manufacturing company like we are, there's a lot of help there. And that's, it's connections to resources that we need. It's not just the money. And they're very creative. So you have to be open. You have to think about what it is. And we have gotten money from them. We've gotten money from RG&E, from some of the other incubators. And I have to tell you, I make it my personal mission to help these folks disperse their funds. And what you have to do is make sure your goals match their goals. Because if their goal is to increase employment and you're not going to hire anyone, it's not going to work. But if you listen and are careful to match their goals to your goals, either there's no match, and so you can stop wasting your time and their time, or you can find a good match and good support. And I think those are the key factors, at least for us, they were.
Super. And I can attest that Rachel and Rex Energy are experts at finding any available resource and helping people spend their money, which is great. Ian, you want to jump in on this and how you guys have evaluated things? You've looked at a lot of different resources and programs out there.
Yeah, definitely. And there is just so many available in New York State. Some other ones that we've participated in addition to the accelerators, or like the RG&E through NextCorps, you can get an ignition grant. It's $25K. That's something that I definitely suggest early companies go for. There's the Excelsior Job Program is something that we're also taking part of. So every year we have some quotas for how many people we intend to hire that we set out to begin that program, and we can get refundable tax credits at the end of the year if we hit our quotas. So there's a ton of programs out there. It's not possible for me to list them all. But one thing I could say is you just have to be really active in the ecosystem. As startups, oftentimes you work closely with, rely on, and frequently have conversations with other startups. Whether they're further along than you, it's someone who's already had an exit event, or they're just at a Series A when you're still at a seed. And it's important to have those conversations, because people will say, I've been through this program, or I haven't been through this program, but I wish I would have gone through this program when I was at your stage. Talk to people in the ecosystem, find mentors, find people who've done it before. And then I think it's important, once you've gotten to a level, to then give back and help someone else out who's just starting out and has a bud of an idea, and saying, hey, first place you should go is you should go after this funding, because it's going to allow you to develop that idea for the next couple months and pay you to do so. So yeah, just be involved in the ecosystem.
Great, thanks. And maybe Sashti, I can call on you too. You've taken advantage of a lot of resources all the way across New York, from Buffalo and Launch New York and Grow New York and Hardware Scale Up and others. So how is it that you've managed to locate where some of these useful programs and services have been?
I think Ian sort of honed in on that. For us, it's developing these relationships. So it's sort of that frequent contact. Mentorship and guidance has been really key. Essentially, we're a brand new company, so knowing what's available and sort of having consistent dialogue, whether it's through phone calls, Zoom calls. Something that I try to do more often. We have weekly summary emails, but maybe it's about every other week now. So what that is essentially what has happened in the past week or so in terms of good things that are happening, things that we need support with. So that's sort of actually an ask in our email. So people who are on our email, and it's just a personal email to about 50 or 60 people who are stakeholders or just friends, or even now sort of mentors. So that ask has really been great, and just connecting me with resources all across New York State, whether it could be insurance, small stuff like that, payroll services, insurance opportunities, people they like or recommend, or even maybe lead generation as well. So that could be an option in the future for creating a small weekly summary email to your contact list.
That's great advice. Regular contact with your network and letting them know what's going on and how they can help. That's a great idea. Dan, did you want to jump in too?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. What we found was the big mistake that I personally made was, in the beginning, when we were desperate for funds, I chased everything. And that was really a mistake, because I spent a lot of time going down dead ends, where if I'd have bothered to put my head above water for a minute and ask around, is this fit us at this stage? Rachel's exactly right. I was chasing the wrong thing at the wrong time and didn't bother to ask. So I think really you need to go out there and find out what's appropriate, where you want to focus your time, and which one of the 10 or 15 things we've all mentioned here are the right things at the right time to go after. So you don't spend a lot of time with things that don't pan out, because that's just such a time sink that it really cost me in the beginning. I learned a difficult lesson, that I wasn't as smart as I thought, and I need to go out and ask for help.
That's good. Very good, Dan. Thanks. And that happens, I think, to everybody, especially on the funding, going out looking for funding, right? Like you said, are they investing in my sector? Are they investing in my stage? Are they investing in my geography? It's so easy to chase every investor that's out there. And unfortunately, you'll get, hey, this sounds really interesting. And all of a sudden you're 3 months down the road talking to somebody, and they eventually then say, you know what, we don't invest in energy companies. So that's important. Let's stay on that theme a little bit if we can. So given that there are so many things, and if you look at even how many accelerator programs exist in the world today, it's so many of them, it's hard to keep track. How do you evaluate maybe if something's not a fit, or are there some things that you guys have kind of jumped into and then determined, geez, had I done something differently, I would have known not to pursue this particular thing? Anybody want to take a crack at that? Ian, do you want to maybe start?
Yeah, I think there's kind of this risk reward analysis that you have to do every time. Is whenever we're undertaking a new program and say there's funding associated with that program, it's a question of how much time and energy is this going to take from us, especially myself and our CEO, because there's only so many hours of the day, and we really have to make sure that every single hour that we're working is being put towards something that increases it has the best impact on the company overall. So everyone has to do that analysis themselves, and it's going to be different. But whenever you're assessing an opportunity, you have to look at, those downsides as well. What are you not going to be able to do because you're doing this opportunity instead? So that's the opportunity cost. That's very important. I think early on, just as Dan was saying, it took us a while. We would spend a lot of time chasing things, and a month would go by and then it would fall through. And we're like, we could just spend that past month focusing on something else.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in on that? Sasha, do you have any comments?
Sure, I'll jump in. This was actually a question that I asked one of my mentors. Sometimes I just get random emails coming, and I don't know how people receive emails, but once it's online, your contact info, they'll send you emails. So one of the program that was someone approached was sort of in a different state in the Midwest, and it might have had an agricultural theme. But when you go a little bit deeper into what the program offers, so key questions are, what were success stories that came out of that program? Connect me to, so speaking with the program coordinator or the manager, can you email me a couple of good clients that came out of this program and sort of review them? Is that something that was that a good success story? Second is maybe ask who their mentors are. And is there a list of mentors, or are they, you want more than just a photo shot of the mentors, like how engaged are they? So maybe ask, those are sort of a couple of questions about that, along with equity. Is the funding versus the equity appropriate for you at that specific stage? So those are sort of 3 comments. So, the mentorship, who are success stories, and sort of the funding versus equity.
All great things. Yeah, we've seen, I think you all have seen websites with programs that show mentors, right? The top people in the world. And then you find out they're actually, you can't access them. They're not really part of the program. And the equity piece is also a good one. You don't want to jump into something for a $10,000 investment and find out they want 20% of your company, right? So great things to do. And I love the ask for references, just like you're going to get some work done at your house, ask for references. Same thing goes with any of these programs.
I think maybe the last thing that I think was really important for me personally was, you got to be able to handle rejection and not take it personally, because you run down that path and you find it's a dead end, but then you need to learn from that. I used to get rejected and say, I'm just wasting my time. But then I would go back and say, okay, well, why did you reject me? What can I learn from that, and kind of hone my presentation for that specific ask for funding. So I think you really just need to be able to learn, but you have to have thick skin, because getting rejected a bunch of times, it's really hard. But if you can learn from it, then it's very valuable.
Yeah, great feedback. It's usually doesn't pay to try to be combative and argue when someone says no. But if you do hear the same thing multiple times, you often should look in the mirror and say, okay, maybe I'm not transmitting the message the way people should be receiving it. So good point. Rachel, you've also been involved in lots of programs and evaluated a lot of them. How do you tell if it's going to be a useful one, or have you gotten involved in some that you said I shouldn't have, and why?
I think everybody's gotten involved in at least something that didn't pan out. All the suggestions so far are really right on the mark. It's actually a big red flag if you ask for references or to speak to a company or two that have gone through the program, and if they're offended by that question, Don't walk, run in the other direction, is what I'd have to say. And I think what I said earlier on, you have to really stay in your lane and you have to understand what is the goal of the program. You know, if it's a program that wants to bring SaaSes to the world and you're a widget manufacturer, I mean, even if they sent you an email, because as Sashi said, you know, once you're on somebody's email, you're on a million emails, and it's just a computer program pulling one word out of your bio that connects it. And then you're wondering, why did they even call me? Or this is early stage, I'm later stage, or the other way around. You have to really know yourself, believe in yourself, and stay in your lane and only go after the ones that make sense. And then have a thick skin, because you'll probably get rejected from a bunch anyway, for good or bad reasons. But, you know, it doesn't matter. If you're rejected, you have to move on. So learn from it and move on.
It's not 100%. There's definitely good programs that will reach out to you, but typically if they're chasing you, they might not be the best program and they might not have the best offering. If you have to chase them and it's competitive, sometimes it's a better program, but that's not 100%.
Good. Anyone else, anything come to mind of something you got into and then said, "Eesh, I wish I wouldn't have gotten involved in this particular program or resource," without naming their names?
I always found that the competitions were the most difficult. I think we finished fourth in like 4 different competitions. And when you finish out of the money, it's a lot of effort, and, you know, we're this close, but not close enough. And so those were difficult for us.
Yeah.
You know, on the question of the references, we actually had a reference that was very well regarded. And then that individual or that group turned out to be a complete and total dud. And so you have to, you know, you have to go beyond just a reference. You have to trust your gut, and you have to really ask questions. And when they say something that might sound a little off, you need to really ask about it. Because a reference knows, you know, an individual or a company or a group from their perspective and their experience. And yours is going to be different. It's your experience.
Great points. Now let's talk about competitions, drill down a little bit. There are a number of, I'll call them competitions and or competitive to get into accelerator programs with lots of funding. And you sometimes see startup founders who spend their careers going from one accelerator or one competition to another, and they keep winning enough money to sort of keep going, but not necessarily making progress in the business. So as far as competitions, Dan, you kind of said, you know, finishing out of the money is a lot of work to participate in those things. And so therefore may not have been, I'll put words in your mouth, maybe not correct, but not sure if they're worth it. Can you guys that have been part of applying for competitions or going through them and or getting in the money, talk a little bit about, are they useful? Are they beneficial? How should you evaluate them? Let's see, I'll jump, start with Sashti, because you've been most recently with Grow New York and was in the money, but can you talk a little bit more broadly?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, was in the money, still am in the money with Grow New York, at least for this year. It was challenging. It wasn't my first time with Grow New York, and I'll be transparent on that. It was, I applied for that program and that competition several times. So it's several times, meaning it's the only 3rd year of the program. So more than once I applied for it. And we kept in touch. I thought it was a great program. I saw the winners and I saw the sort of the success stories from the winners. And we had a good story with We Radiate being in the region, having wanting to do local startups, wanting to expand our manufacturing base with our local supply chain here. So that's why we applied again, and we kept in touch and we asked them, what can we do for next year's application? So in 2020, when we didn't make it to the finalists, we asked them, and they were great. They're a great team. They're a great staff. So kudos to them. They actually were able to review and give guidance. So that made us want to apply once more. And then once we were in the system, I guess I shouldn't say that, once we were a finalist, there's additional support. So it's not like you're doing this by yourself. And I wasn't aware of the additional support that Grow New York would. They essentially want the finalists, all of them, to succeed. Unfortunately, they cannot support all of them because there's 20, but they do put those resources in to support all the finalists. And that was pretty impressive. And that continues today. So for the one-year program that we're in. We have steady contact, but we have a mentorship. We have a mentor to support us through our different milestones that we have to achieve. So that has been pretty great. And that's sort of a big first win for us, receiving the $250,000. So we want to then leverage that opportunity with resources at NextCorps, which we actually are doing thanks to staff at NextCorps with the NET and others through the MEP program and also the MEIR. So can we leverage additional funding to support us on manufacturing? That's certainly what we're doing now with that win.
Super. Ian, anything? You've been in some of the competitive sort of programs or competitions, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, programs that come with guaranteed funding, whether it's Luminate, where all teams get a certain amount of money at the beginning of the program, or Genius New York, where all 5 finalists are guaranteed at least $500,000. Those are really great because you know that you're going to get something back for your time and effort. But I think the best programs are the ones where you have to do the least to adapt your materials to apply for. They're going to ask for a lot of things: business strategy, your business plan, financial stuff like that. But if it's a good fit, you should really have minor adaptation to those documents for that program. So, really just make sure you're applying for things that are the best fit for what stage you are as a company and what your focus is.
Great. Dan or Rachel, anything you wanted to add to that before we move on?
I would agree with Ian. The competitions we've won were the ones where we had to adjust very little, and we actually didn't overthink our responses or our submissions. There are some times that we just like pour over the application, and I've come to the conclusion it's not helpful. You just need to be able to respond. You might have to, fine tune and edit your writing and so on. But if you have to spend, and they tell you, oh, it should take 45 minutes or it should take 3 hours. Well, we've never made it in any of those time limits that they suggest. It always takes us more. But if it takes long, more than double the amount of time or something like that, you're either overthinking or maybe it's not that good a fit. You may still get something out of applying because it's making you think about certain things that you weren't thinking about. But I think Ian's right that when you don't have to, when you're not trying to put, yourself into a square, into
Yes.
a round hole, you're a square in a round hole, you're probably in a better place when you're applying.
Great. Dan, I don't know that you were part of any of these sorts of things, were you? Or
We tried a bunch of times, but like I say, we finished just out of the money, and
yeah,
so I'm probably not a good person to talk about it.
no, you are absolutely. We do have one question in the Q&A that's related to this, so let me throw this out to the group. And the question is it normal for some accelerator or incubator programs to charge you to join that accelerator program, or is that a red flag? Anyone want to take a shot at that?
I can say we stayed away from the ones that wanted to charge us because that's not what we were looking for. We were more inclined to find ones that could help us funding.
Yeah, most will charge you in the sense that they take equity in your company, but that's a good thing because that equity is really only worth as well as your company does. So, they're in it to support you and grow you as a company, and then that equity is worth more to them. Ones that are asking for, cash payouts or something of that sort, that's something that I would be skeptical about.
Sashti, any thoughts on that, or Rachel?
I feel like Ian probably has more experience on that, but I don't know if it's a red flag per se, but just dive deep into it. That's sort of my thing. Can you do your due diligence on that program a little bit more? So you have that gut feeling to see if it's a good fit or not.
Yeah. And I think we'd concur with that sort of sentiment. Doing the due diligence is good, but again, it kind of goes to the other comment. If folks are finding you on a list and reaching out and inviting you to be part of their great program, and it only costs you $20,000 to join, I would go after those with some skepticism to really see if it's worth it. Again, I think, Sashti, your comment about reference checking would be a good thing because you'd rather they're more aligned with your success than looking to fill seats so they can make money off you guys. Okay, we've got, let's see, some other questions here. back to sort of the hearing no, there's a question. How do you stay motivated when you hear the word no, or when you're overwhelmed? And have there ever been cases where you did hear no and gone back later and gotten a yes? I'll let anyone jump in that wants to start that one.
I'll jump in. Yeah, we pitched a number of times to a bunch of different investors, and every time the pitch got a little bit better based on their feedback. They said no, but, and gave us some great feedback. I think the third or maybe it was the fourth time I pitched to Excel, they finally said, okay, I think we're ready to go ahead and invest. So I think it was really good. But like I said before, you try to learn from those no's, but also you have to have some pretty thick skin, because a couple of the folks I pitched to were pretty brutal, and they just sort of laughed me out of the room. And that was really tough to take in the beginning. But I think you learn from that and how to get your message across better. And that's where the Nexus program was phenomenal, and keeping us motivated to stay with it and keep trying and refine the message and get it to where it was actually presentable in a form that the investor could understand.
Anybody else want to jump on that one? Okay. All right,
I could try to, Jim. This is how I'm phrasing it in my head with essentially clients. So maybe approaching a client, and at that moment, usually our clients can be from farmers, it could be municipalities, it can be for-profit companies as well. So there, you could think about municipalities, funding only comes once a year. So maybe there's strategic time to ask for a client to, use your services, and maybe that's not the right time, and they'll say reach out again. So maybe they might say no initially, but stay in good contact with them, try to develop that relationship, have them know who you are as a company, and then maybe the second time or even a third time they can get a yes out of it. So stay diligent and stay consistent. And also on that other end, I should also, and this is something I've learned maybe for clients, is trying to get money. People are trying to get money, but maybe it's not the best source. There's also good customers and bad customers, or I shouldn't say, there's good customers and not so great customers. So that's something that I learned in this process. Try not to say yes to everything and everybody when you're growing.
That's an interesting topic in and of itself. So as a startup, again, maybe more of a customer standpoint or partner standpoint, the temptation is to say yes to everything because you want to chase things, and pretty soon you're over here when your focused area or target market or other things were here. How do you, Ian, Dan, Rachel, how do you stay focused on where you're going when you might get these other things that look like opportunities that might want to take you in a different direction? Rachel.
So that's happened to us. We started out thinking more B2C, shifted to B2B. As you can imagine, if you just look out the window, when you're driving well, if you're the driver, don't do that. But if you're the passenger, look out the window and you'll notice how large a variety of windows there are out there in the world. And so for us, we can't address every window to start. Once we're at scale, we will not be able to address every window. There are going to have to be multiple companies providing solutions for multiple types of windows. So for us, what's happening is we have a lane we're trying to stay in, which right now is a B2B and mostly in the multifamily and older commercial office. And even in there, there's quite a bit of variation. And we get requests, and we will sometimes do a B2C because it's got a good mix of what we need to learn more about. Or we hear from the market, requests for a larger size than we can do, smaller size that we can do. And, I'd say probably every 3 to 6 months, we sit down and at least informally reassess, is the market, we may want to be, right in this lane over here on a 6-lane market, we want to be in lane 2, but maybe the market that really wants us right now is in lane 1 or in lane 3. And should we be adjusting to accommodate that where there's more demand? Because at the end of the day, none of us can make it if we can't sell. So where we think the demand is, where we think it may be because of our customer discovery, which may or may not be good because people tell you what they think you want to hear, not necessarily what they mean. And that is basically a quote from a marketing guru, said you can do all the customer discovery in the world, but they probably won't tell you the truth. So you have to learn on the ground what they really mean. So you have to think about, well, I thought I was here, but maybe my initial market, and that's really critical. The initial market to start to scale from is half a lane over or 2 lanes over. So, you have to trust your gut, but you have to keep open and be open.
Great. Ian, I know, right, enough about you guys that you've got this 360 camera that has lots of opportunity spaces out there, from entertainment, now drones and other stuff. So there's always got to be someone on your team that says, oh my gosh, we can do this. And we got this company that wants to talk to us. And how do you sort those out and really figure out where to focus?
Yeah, I think it's important as a company to be willing to pivot with the market and with opportunities. We started as focusing on media and entertainment, and we're working on a large joint development agreement with a very large media and entertainment company when the pandemic hit. And the market forces just changed so much overnight that we ended up looking around and saying, where can we, adapt this technology to fill a need right now for a market that is currently buying? And that's what led us to aerospace and defense. So I think you should always be open to do a pivot, but something that's important is just making sure that whatever you're focusing on, that's what you're putting all your energy and time behind at that time. And as a small company, you just have to be realistic and realize you can only really truly focus on maybe 1 or 2 things as a company. And you can't do 6 different opportunities at once. Maybe once you're a much larger company, you can have different divisions pursuing a bunch of different opportunities. But as a small company, you really have to choose just the top 1 or 2 things.
Yeah, great. And Dan, too, with you guys early on at AFC, I'm sure there were discussions, if I can remember, about, right, should we make membrane electrode assemblies? Should we make full fuel cell stacks? How'd you determine what your product really should be?
And we got lucky, and we started out at the largest scale thinking, we could be an automotive supplier at full fuel cell systems. And we took a look around how much funding we had, how much resources we had, and it kept winnowing down from the system to the stack down to just the MEA itself. And so then at that point, it was pretty clear this is what we could focus on and be successful. And so that's where we started. And we got really lucky because we had grandiose ideas in the beginning coming from an automotive company that we could sort of replicate that. And it was nearly impossible at the scale we wanted to. So kind of narrowed it down. And then we were faced with a number of different applications, everything from drones all the way up to automobiles to Class 8 trucks. Had all these opportunities. We needed to know which one to follow. And we got lucky, and we kind of zeroed in on the forklift model and did very well there. So.
Great. All right, let's jump back to the Q&A. We've got a question from Gilbert. Has anyone leveraged site resources early on with your idea, like Growth Mentor or Mentor Crews, for validation or networking? And if so, what was your experience? I'm not familiar with those, but is anybody else familiar with those or similar things? All right, Gilbert, sorry, we couldn't answer that one.
I'm going to try to answer that, but I'm not familiar. I was researching them, just LinkedIn. I just looked at it while you put them in, Gilbert. But I'm just going to shout out to NextCorps on their opportunities. They provide those mentorship and opportunities throughout their staff. So obviously we're on the call with James, but you see Kate. Kate is extraordinary with marketing. So I've actually had one-to-one calls with Kate. I've had conversations with Holly as well on sort of getting an office space. James is on the call, but also there are other team members like Matt and Max. So I feel like NextCorps has a really good skill set and experience for a lot of the maybe ideas that you have in your head, Gilbert. And you could get like a monthly, and I don't know the package amounts, but I'm sure Kate or James knows the different opportunities to be a member of NextCorps, and it's fairly, it could be a good choice for your funding to be part of NextCorps.
Thanks for the sales pitch, Sash. Do you appreciate it? Let's talk about the mentor as a broader thing too. And how did each of you find mentors or advisors, or did you have advisory boards? Or how did you find those that really matched your business needs and where you're going? And is it possible to have too many voices and too many mentors and advisors? So Ian, you're nodding, so I'll go with you first. Dan, you're smiling, so you're second.
Yeah, so I mean, we definitely looked at ourselves as founders and where we needed the most assistance, what experiences we had, and then what experiences we were lacking, and where you really want to find a mentor, someone that can coach you in those areas you're lacking. Sometimes you're too young and you can't afford to hire a business development person yet, but can you get someone who's done a lot of business development in their life to coach you? And then, founders just kind of fill in and do everything. Besides that, yes, you can absolutely have much mentorship. It's something over time you pick up advisors and mentors and people who want to just follow along and hear what's going on. And it becomes quite a hassle to just keep everyone updated. And you realize a lot of people are providing the same feedback that others have already provided. So every now and then you kind of have to call the herd and you say, hey, it's been great working with you. But my schedule's changed and this has just become difficult to carry on. I'd like to stay in touch, but maybe rather than weekly updates, we're going to touch base quarterly, or we can, add you to our newsletter and, once in a blue moon, have a call type thing.
So you figured out how to graciously fire mentors, basically. Dan.
Yeah, we were really fortunate that we got into the EIR, the Entrepreneur in Training, a residence kind of program at the very beginning. We had an excellent mentor at the very beginning who helped us launch, and then nothing against that mentor, but we sort of outgrew him pretty quickly. Then we were kind of paired up with a second mentor, and that was perfect for where we needed to go. And then he stayed with us all the way till the end, and I still talk to him regularly about things that are going on at Plug Power. So he's just been a phenomenal resource and really helped us all along the way with everything from trying to find insurance and how to hire and how to leverage resources. And he went with us for the acquisition talk as well. I'm sure he didn't get paid enough money or enough hours for what he did, but he was phenomenal. So we were just very fortunate to find a really good one the second time through.
Great. Rachel, anything to add on mentors? Advisor?
Yeah, I mean, we had mentors have been great, and you have to, it's always about staying in the lane. I keep repeating myself, but that's really what it is. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do because you're pulled in so many different directions. We recently had an experience with a mentor who over time developed conflicts in his mentorship with us. And we found out about it listening to him on a panel and realized that this is really not appropriate. He should have said something to us. And that's something, your due diligence is yours and it remains your responsibility. It was very disappointing that he wasn't honest up front and just said, I've now taken on whatever partnership position it was, and they're invested in a competitor of yours. That's pretty strong. So the mentors are great, but at the end of the day, you have to make sure that they're right for you. And, we had been working with this particular individual for over 2 years, maybe 3 even. So you really develop a relationship of trust. I'm not sure I have a good way to warn everyone to how to get, how to listen so that something doesn't seem right. But that's something to be aware of on the flip side of the mentorship.
Yep, sounds good. We have a question from Bob Lertz. Hi, Bob, how are you? And I think we've touched on this one already. So the question is, how do you decide on your target customer focus? For example, Sashti mentioned farmers and municipalities, which are pretty different from each other. Dan, you talked about kind of the market sort of, you got down to membranes pretty quickly. And Ian, you talked about kind of how you evaluated where to go. But Sashti, maybe you can just touch on that because those are very different targets from farmers to munis.
Yeah, Bob, good. Thanks for calling me out, Bob. NextCorps program is great. So that is a free program through NSF, the National Science Foundation, and it's about 1 or 2 months long. We did that. I wish I would have done that actually sooner. We only did that last year. And that essentially hones in who could be the great target customers. So I did mention farms and municipalities, but I should be more specific. It would be recycling or sustainability coordinators within towns or municipalities or villages, and compost operators maybe working at a compost facility or at a farm. So that's who would buy or use our sort of system. So that's sort of how specific, granular you have to get. The I-Corps program is excellent. It's offered through Cornell, University of Buffalo, and all across the country.
Great. We go to the next question. We've got about 5 minutes left and a few left here in the queue. Question from James, and this goes to manufacturing resources, and we actually happen to have all four of you kind of make stuff. So this is very appropriate. Did you have problems finding space for manufacturing operations as you ramped up? And did you get any assistance in, I'll say, finding, but also funding some of those activities? So what resources did you guys find to help you with actually production and ramp up?
We've chosen the route of contract manufacturing. You know, I come from the real estate world, so I'm unwilling to go and, put up my own factory until the volumes really justify that. And we also wanted expertise in a particular area for manufacturing. And so we felt going the contract manufacturing route was the best one. It was difficult to find a contract manufacturer who could make our product the way we wanted to make it. But we found a really great match, and we're thrilled with that. I don't know how the others have worked with that.
Yep. Dan, you mentioned kind of Eastman Business Park. You probably were aware of them, or how did you become aware of them, or other resources you've tapped into?
Yeah, we're fortunate. We toll coat over at Kodak, so we just rent the equipment for a time period. And then, similar to Rachel, we found a very good contract assembler who had space and had resources, and we're able to put them on. We bought the machinery, installed it over there, and then they've been, for the last 4 or 5 years, fully staffing it for us. And there's probably 80 people over there now assembling that one part. So it's been really good for us to leverage that.
Ian or Sashi?
I echo the contract manufacturers. As a small company, you can only be good at so many things. We're really good at R&D and engineering. We don't have the manufacturing expertise in-house, plus we don't have the facility. It costs millions of dollars to get something like that up and running. So it was important for us to identify contract manufacturers. We haven't started actively manufacturing any of our systems yet, but we have 2 contract manufacturers who we work with for the 2 different lines that we're finishing up right now. It's important to kind of loop them in ahead of time, because they can give you that feedback on your system on how to make it more manufacturable, so it'll be cheaper and get better return over time.
Great.
Well, quickly, so I wasn't aware of the resources upstate in Ithaca and Rochester and Buffalo that do contract manufacturing. And James, I'll try to get the second point. Did you get any assistance? I'm assuming financial assistance. There is a Fuse Hub grant. So Fuse Hub is a great New York State. They have a specific manufacturing grant up to $50,000. So we were actually able to connect with our contract manufacturer through NextCorps to actually get one of those grants last year.
Yep. And let me also add and put a plug in for the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program, which exists in Rochester, but in the regions all across the state, have resources. They also have a network of all manufacturers in their particular regions. And there are grant dollars through RG&E and National Grid and others that could provide up to 40 or 50K to help you kind of build out your manufacturing plans. As well as some of the programs that we run, we do. So one of the challenges with startups is they don't speak the language of a contract manufacturer necessarily. There's a mismatch between those kind of things. And some manufacturers don't want to work with a startup who shows up with a napkin sketch. And so there's been several programs that seek to try to help that communication. So teaching startups, we talked about manufacturing readiness levels, bill of materials, bill of process, those kind of things, and actually doing tours of contract manufacturers so startups can see what they actually do and how to interact with them. I think that we'll try to get to the other questions via email. I think we're just about out of time. So let me give everybody sort of one last thing, any piece of advice that you would give a startup or an entrepreneur that's listening on how to find support for their business. I'll go around my screen. Ian, you're in the top left corner of my screen.
Like I said earlier, I think networking and asking people who have done it before is probably one of the best things you can do. Obviously, there's always new programs coming out, so it's important to keep an eye on what's happening there. But ask people that have been through programs before you. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it worth the time? And do you think it's a fit for what I'm doing at my company?
Dan.
if you're passionate, stick it out would be my one advice. And the other, like Ian said, is ask. I'm always available. If you have a question I can help answer, let me know. I'm happy to jump in, and Jim, you can give out my information. I'm happy to help.
Great, we appreciate that. Rachel?
I'll repeat it again, stay in the lane, don't get distracted. And when you get funding, make sure you understand upfront what kind of documentation the funder requires in order to release the funds or to release the next tranche of funds if they give you the first tranche up front. That can save you a lot of time if you understand that up front, so you collect your receipts in the way they need it.
Great. And Sashti, bring us home.
Wow, first one and now the last one. Okay, so for me, this is what I do. I have a whiteboard. I write down my goals. I keep track of sort of that progress. It might be psychological, but I also visualize sort of that progress as well in my head. It's like, what is that I want to achieve, and sort of see that to fruition. And then something that I learned recently is try to do just 1% more each day, each week, each month. And then that sort of helps you sort of elevate growth. If you could do just a little bit, 1% more each day, that's all.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Ian, Dan, Rachel, Sashti. You guys are all doing fantastic jobs with your own companies. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your journeys with us and with the audience. I think, as Kate mentioned, and Kate, feel free to jump in, but a copy of this recording and this video will be emailed out to everybody who registered. Kate, anything else to add?
That's correct. And please, if you would like to join us for other Startup Week sessions, you can find that right on our website. There's a call to action right on the very top. You will receive the recording. I will also try to incorporate some of the links for the resources that we talked about today. Someone sent me a request anonymously, and we will get back to you for your question that was in the queue. I'll ask that around to our panelists later today. Great discussion today. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, all of our panelists. Really appreciate your time. Have a good rest of your afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.